Over a week after alleging India's involvement in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Nijjar, Justin Trudeau's hypocrisy has been exposed. Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar schooled Trudeau, calling out organized crime, violence and extremism in Canada.
You also have to appreciate, Ken, that in the last few years, Canada actually has seen a lot of organized crime, relating to, the secessionist forces, organized crime, violence, extremism.
India calls a spade a spade. Canada providing a safe haven for some of India's most wanted individuals. This includes gangsters and terrorists.
They're all very, very deeply mixed up. So, in fact, we have been, talking about specifics and information. We have actually been badgering the Canadians. We have given them a lot of information about organized crime leadership, which operates out of Canada. There are a large number of extradition requests. There are terrorist leaders who have been identified.
India asserts its stance firmly. In the midst of an escalating diplomatic dispute with Canada, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has forthrightly expressed India's views at the United Nations and outside in New York. Selective actions in the name of preserving territorial integrity and internal affairs not acceptable.
Nor must we countenance that political convenience determines responses to terrorism, extremism and violence. Similarly, respect for territorial integrity and non-interference in internal affairs cannot be exercises in cherry-picking. When reality departs from the rhetoric, we must have the courage to call it out.
Canada has pointed fingers at India over the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, designated as terrorist by India.
We cannot bend the rules of state-to-state relations for political expediency, because we've seen and continue to see the extent to which democracies are under threat through various means of foreign interference.
India has made it abundantly clear that it rejects any form of diplomatic dominance in shaping international rules.
For all the talk, it is still a few nations who shape the agenda and seek to define the norms. This cannot go on indefinitely, nor will it go unchallenged. A fair, equitable, and democratic order will surely emerge once we all put our minds to it. And for a start, that means ensuring that rule makers do not subjugate rule takers. After all, rules will work only when they apply equally to all.
However, India, while rejecting Canadian allegations, remains open to examining the Nijjar case if Canada can provide substantial evidence.
One, we told the Canadians that this is not the government of India's policy. Two, we told the Canadians saying that, look, if you have something specific, if you have something relevant, let us know. We are open to looking at it. So, but to understand the context of it, in a way, because the picture is not complete without the context in a way.
India rejects any attempts at diplomatic manipulations while remaining open to dialogue and cooperation. Bureau Report, India Today.
India, meanwhile, continues to tighten the screws on the Khalistani gangster network. The NIA today conducted raids at 53 locations across 7 states. The raids are linked to Canada-based terrorist Arsh Dala and gangsters Lawrence Bishnoi and Sukhadanike.
Amid the escalating India-Canada standoff, the National Investigation Agency has intensified its crackdown on Khalistani terrorists. The NIA on Wednesday raided 50 locations in Punjab, Rajasthan, Haryana, Uttarakhand, Delhi and Uttar Pradesh. During the raids, the NIA detained wanted Canada-based terrorist Arsh Dala's aide Jora from Firozpur in Punjab. Sources in the NIA have revealed how Khalistani gangsters based abroad are funding overground workers in India through Hawala channels to procure drugs and weapons. Information retrieved, Khalistani gangsters arrested under the UAPA so far has shown the nexus is involved in terrorist funding and arms supply from foreign soil.
Khalistani terror modules now under scanner of the NIA, and what we know is that this pertains to 6 states. The Khalistani extremist groups are already under pressure with properties being seized. Other properties of 19 terror groups have now been under process of identification, and there would be a lot of action which would be done on ground. But clearly at this point of time, a lot of action happening in Punjab.
The NIA's charge sheet, accessed by India Today, reveals how Khalistani terrorist Arsh Dala runs an extortion gang and supplies arms and drugs from Pakistan through drones. The charge sheet also claims Khalistanis are targeting Punjabi music and film industries and are demanding extortion money from producers and directors. The NIA court documents expose the alleged nexus between Khalistanis and Dawood Ibrahim. In the investigation, it has come to light that terror outfit Babbar Khalsa International has built up ties with Dawood and through him with banned terrorist organizations like the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Indian Mujahideen. With Kamaljeet Sandhu in Chandigarh and Shreya Chatterjee in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining me on the news track at this time is Dr. Kiran Bedi, former Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, comes from Amritsar, understands the people and the politics of Punjab. With us also on this broadcast is former diplomat Veena Sikri. We have Surya Khanegaunkar, well-known columnist, Francesca Marino, and Max Abrams, international security professor and author of a book on terrorist dynamics. Dr. Bedi, to you first. You come from Punjab, you understand the problems and the politics of the state. We've seen Foreign Minister Jai Shankar at the United Nations General Assembly hit out at the Canadian Prime Minister, levelling these allegations, saying that you've levelled charges but so far failed to produce any evidence to back them. What are you making, ma'am, of this entire controversy?
Well, the information I've gathered from friends and relatives there is that they're dismissing it as his political compulsions. They understand what's happening and it's political. So therefore, I think they're not very enamored. They understand that this is his political compulsions and he's got into the trap.
India has belatedly started clamping down on these Khalistani terrorists, confiscating their assets, whether it's in Amritsar, Chandigarh, elsewhere in Punjab. This should have been done a long time back. Do you think we were mistaken in not moving fast enough, not taking strict action much sooner than we are?
Keep doing this, what they're doing now. Keep being very persistent and not delayed. In fact, I was reading in the papers that for certain confiscations and sealing, there's certain things were pending for long. We need not have any pending. We do it faster and we do it effectively and we do it soon enough. We don't have to wait. Don't lose time. Seize properties immediately.
One of the things that's been discussed in the past few days is the concern around the resurfacing of the bogey of Khalistan. While it enjoys very minimal support in Punjab, the concern that in countries like Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, that now it's getting greater amplification, more mind space than in the past. You've seen the movement rise and fall. Do you think that this is now dead and buried, or could it still resurface in some way to trouble us in the future?
We'll have to keep a watch, but the feedback from my state and cities like Amritsar, etc., I found out from both the communities, my Hindu friends and my Sikh friends, it's not impacting them. It's however, yes, they do call most of these the Sikh youth, the young youth, Sikh call almost Canada their first home. They almost call it their first home. but they are not. And also, I think that information which is coming through the media, that they are foot soldiers, many of them get recruited as foot soldiers, is spreading an alarm amongst the youth to say this is not what they were going for. So I think that is creating a dent. But yes, the youth of Punjab and many parents of Punjab and certainly rural areas have been considering Canada as their another home, or even some of them first home. So I think that's getting dented a bit, but also cautioning, sending the word around that their youth, if they go, they could get vulnerable and get into the trap, becoming foot soldiers of the Khalistan movement. So that I think is helping and sending the alarm bells. Otherwise, there in Punjab, there is no disharmony. There is nothing like this. It's still remaining moderate and only looking for better governance. I think what Punjab is only now looking for better governance and not revival of any one of these movements.
The Canadian government has been extremely soft on Khalistani elements, looking away rather than clamping down. Posters have been put up asking for Indian diplomats to be killed and targeted, calls for Hindus to be killed. The government in Ottawa looking the other way. Ma'am, how do you think the Indian government should be dealing with this beyond what we've already seen being done?
You know, all this has surfaced now as common citizens. It surfaced now, only earlier. All the time we only kept hearing that the government of India is cautioning UK, Australia, US, and of course Canada. Even when Prime Minister Trudeau visited us, it was, but nothing in detail as the way it's now it got exposed. So I think what is now clearly evident that both the Trudeaus, the father and the son, have been riding a tiger. They have been riding a tiger. They were riding, and they are now almost becoming, if I would say, victims of this. But it's political. The political system also throws up this kind of dependency. I think the election system, choosing of candidates, I think they need to. It's throwing up this dependency. So I think that dependency is now they're becoming victims of it themselves. Of course, they would not call it as victims, but to my mind, an ordinary reader and a television watcher, I think they're becoming victims of this, and they probably do not know how to get off this because they are politically dependent on this. So I think the future elections alone will tell whether the moderate six vote them out, and not get back to these kind of candidates again. And Canada is also suffering. Canada is suffering. Indian Canadians are suffering, and even Canada as a whole, because they're witnessing organized crime, and then organized crime being considered as freedom of speech. Where is freedom of speech? And I think it's gone too far. Both the father and the son have been riding a tiger, and now the tiger is becoming dangerous. Very, very
organized crime can never be misconstrued as freedom of speech. It can never be presented as freedom of speech. That is completely unacceptable. And remember also the manner in which Justin Trudeau clamped down on troubles within, whether it is against those who were part of the truckers' protest, whether it is against those who didn't want vaccines. Look at how he's dealing with his own affairs for far less offensive crimes. And even if it is a crime at all, I mean, somebody doesn't want a vaccine, they don't want a vaccine. How can you start freezing their bank accounts and taking action against them? And in the same way, if the truckers protesting, I mean, surely they have a right to protest much more than anybody who's actually asking for India to be broken up and taking up arms against the Indian state. Joining me on this broadcast now, Surya Khanegaunkar, Veena Sikri, Francesca Marino, Max Abrams. I want to go across to Max Abrams first, because the Indian Foreign Affairs Minister putting Justin Trudeau on the mat and saying, if you've got evidence, lay it out. Now, obviously, he's not expecting any evidence to come out, otherwise the Indian Foreign Affairs Minister in New York wouldn't be asking for that. But that puts the Canadian government under a lot of pressure. If you've leveled this charge, now walk the talk, show us your proof.
Trudeau is in a tough spot because he hasn't provided the evidence. India is denying any government involvement in this targeted killing. And at the same time, there are reports in the West, both on the Canadian side as well as from the United States, that a so-called Five Eye partner, major ally of Canada, presumably the United States, was involved in providing evidence which led Trudeau to allege that India was behind this attack. So, it's hard to know what the truth is here. In the event that India is behind it, the United States might be telling Canada, look, you're forbidden from providing the evidence, because it could be that the United States was spying on India, on diplomats in Canada, and won't allow Canada to share the information. There's a lot that we don't know, but what is clear is that Trudeau seems to be in an embarrassing situation, because he's made this, this big claim. He hasn't provided any evidence either to India or to the public. So naturally, there are many people who doubt him. So we'll see. We'll see what he ends up doing with this.
Francesca, how do you think Europe and others are looking at the charges that Justin Trudeau has leveled, given that no evidence has been laid out to back the charges that have been made by the Canadian Prime Minister?
Sorry, I did not get the connection is not that good. Can you repeat?
Francesca Marino, my question is about how countries in Europe are viewing, according to you, the charges leveled by the Canadian Prime Minister against alleged Indian assets, Indian agents who he says carried out this hit without providing anybody any proof. The investigative agencies haven't said it, his own police force hasn't said it, and yet he's gone out and leveled this charge. How do you think Europe is looking at it?
I mean, it's ridiculous. You don't accuse a friendly country. You don't accuse an ally if you don't have proofs. Well, without showing strong, solid evidences. And what's more funny, it looks like everybody has seen the evidences except the Indian government. I mean, tomorrow even my domestic help will come saying, I've seen the evidences. But another very strange thing is that nobody actually is talking of detailed proofs. It's just, credible links. It is most probably linked. I mean, this is not the way a country behaves. A Western first world country behave. Of course, frankly, in Italy, there's not that much interest, strangely enough, because, as I said elsewhere, we have the biggest Sikh community after UK, and we had been having in the past, and even 2 days ago, episodes of violence. 2 years ago, the Indian embassy in Rome is being defaced. But even then, the reaction was quite mild in Italy because, and rightly so, the Sikh community is widely perceived as peaceful. But it is a couple of years that Khalistani elements is a constant, thin but constant stream of people coming into Italy. And I've been told by Italian sources, I've been told that they arrive not as, any random boat running away. They arrive in perfectly in style, carrying papers already compiled and signed by a lawyer asking for political asylum. I've been asked by people in charge of dealing.
Okay, Veena Sikri, we've seen that Justin Trudeau hasn't had much international support. Do you think he's played his cards wrong? He probably would have expected that the Western world would rally to his cause. Everyone basically turning around and now asking for evidence which he hasn't been able to lay out.
Yes, I agree with you, and I agree with the way in which our foreign minister placed this matter very, very succinctly on the floor of the UNGA, that there has to be credible evidence, credible allegations don't mean anything, and that they cannot be cherry picking. You cannot say that you can pick any country you like and pretend to have a case, where somebody is attacking the territorial integrity and of India. And also, it is well known that the Khalistani extremists are indulging in terrorism, in violence, and they are Canadian citizens, or as we just heard, maybe Italian and other citizens. So the Canadian government has a lot to answer for the links between these terrorists and their counterparts in other countries indulging in drug trafficking, human trafficking. I'm glad that the government of India is cutting this umbilical cord that may have existed between groups in Canada of Canadian nationality now and trying to incite events in India. We've seen that Gurpatwant Singh Pannun has made a huge statement today saying he's going to stop the World Cricket Cup final in Ahmedabad and say it's going to be a World Terror Cup. He's an American citizen. He's a Canadian citizen, dual citizenship. These countries must answer why they are allowing their citizens to attack India with the threat of violence and extremism. So I think that Prime Minister Trudeau has not enjoyed by any means the support that he thought he would get. And within his own country, it has backfired spectacularly on him. His own parliament member, the leader of the opposition, the Premier of British Columbia, they're asking him questions. You are saying all this, but where is the evidence? You have not provided us any evidence. We do not know why you are making these allegations against a friendly country like India. And then you find that these extremists and violence, I think they should not even be called Khalistanis, because in India, as Dr. Bedi has said very correctly, there is no interest in this. There is no support for it. There is only connection through terrorism and violence, whether it is Lawrence Bishnoi or other people who are in jail here. So I think that it is for Canada and America to answer why their citizens are attacking India with threats of violence and extremism. And I think that Prime Minister Trudeau has learned this, and he should now answer the questions that India is asking. Where is your evidence? Why are you allowing your own citizens to attack India, to attack the territorial integrity of India and the sovereignty of India? Why are you allowing these people who may have one time been of Indian origin, but now they are your citizens? Why are you allowing them to indulge in human trafficking?
Absolutely. And follow the same rules that you follow against truckers who are protesting against you, or those who don't want vaccines. Look at how the might of the Canadian state comes down on them, and here are people who are asking for arms to be raised, for diplomats to be killed, for Hindus to be chased away out of Canada, and that seems to be okay. I want to go across to my colleague Anisha Mathur. She joins us from Toronto. She's been there for the last several days. I hope she's not planning to immigrate to Canada and just stay over there and not come back. Anisha, good morning, welcome. We've been looking at your reportage very carefully.
Good morning.
How is Jaishankar's address at the UNGA and his subsequent interactions at smaller conferences being perceived in Canada? From what I can see, Justin Trudeau now under a lot of pressure to lay out the evidence and to prove that he has some material evidence to back the wild charges he made.
Well, Rahul, here in Canada, we're seeing a very strange situation where the ordinary person on the ground, the ordinary Indian origin citizen on the ground, is saying, well, we don't want to get into this debate. We don't support Khalistan. There's some gangster, there's some very small amount of people who are supporting this, but at the same time, they will not come out and oppose it because they are worried about the ramifications against them. So it is very clear that there is something that the Canadian government also needs to be careful about, because if this ordinary citizen is not ready to speak out in the open, but is in the drawing rooms, in their in public places talking about how this is not a good thing, how this is creating a lot of tensions among the people. This is something that, as our guests have been talking about, the Canadian government needs to look at very, very carefully. We've seen instances of, in the last 2 years, if we look at the history that has been happening, this issue has come up on a this issue is getting traction in Canada over the last few years. More importantly, there have been attacks on journalists, there have been vandalism of temples. There is a question of why these people have the kind of, have been allowed to amass the kind of influence and money, and more importantly, even political backing that they do, because this ultimately is coming from a very, very small number of people, according to everyone I've spoken to here, that it is only about 5% of the Sikhs here who are talking about it. In fact, they're connecting it to gang violence, they're connecting it to to drug trade, they're connecting it to immigration fraud, they're connecting it to a lot of things, but what they're not doing is speaking out in the open. And Trudeau and the other MPs here, of course, they are being accused of vote bank politics here. That is this something that they're looking at? Because the ridings here, which is what they call the smaller constituencies, the ridings here have when the votes are counted, the election results change by a factor of just a couple of thousand votes. And that is what the people here seem to be indicating, that because of that, because of the influence that these people hold in the local gurdwaras, in the local trade of the main cities, like in Brampton, in Surrey, in several other places, that is why they've amassed the kind of influence that they have, and that is something that is worrying the ordinary citizen of Canada. And Trudeau, of course, is being questioned repeatedly by the people as well as other. It is a very interesting phenomena. Rahul, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you well. Quickly wrap up.
Yeah. Sorry, just two sentences. If you see the parliamentary proceedings, even the MPs here are at one hand asking Trudeau for the actual evidence, but at the same time, they seem to be not wanting to rock the boat as it seems, is with regard to their voters and their constituents. So it's a very strange situation we are seeing here, where they're at the
Now, this is an important point that you're making, and I want to go to Surya Khane Gaonkar. Thanks, Anisha. I don't want to hold you for longer. We'll keep coming back to you for more. You can keep watching Anisha's reportage from Canada. But she makes a very important point, Surya, that there are many right-minded Sikhs who are very moderate, don't like the idea of radical Khalistan at all. And yet, for various reasons, in India and in Canada, don't want to speak out too openly for fear of retribution.
Absolutely, Rahul. And I think that this problem of the neo-Khalistani movement is actually you can call it a religion unto itself, which actually shields criminals, drug traffickers, human traffickers, people who are basically escaping sometimes India to Canada to ply their trade out there under the banner of Khalistan. And one of the issues that the diaspora has faced is the capture of gurdwaras by these narco-terror gangs. And
but how do you think we can take the gurdwaras back? Now, let's imagine that in few gurdwaras, whether they're in Brampton or Surrey, those are now controlled by very pro-Khalistan elements. Now, how do you take them back? Because the government can't really get involved in the matters of a religion, right?
Absolutely, and the first step to getting to returning these gurdwaras to the moderates and to the masses actually is forcing Canada's hand to crack down on these individuals, and that is exactly what I think the government of India is trying to do, and it is coming up against a lot of pressure from I would say both the United States and Canada. If we listen into Dr. Jaishankar's talk at the Council for Foreign Relations yesterday, the language that was used even by Ambassador Kenneth Juster was kind of in line with what Secretary Blinken had said. He mentioned a Sikh leader, Sikh activist, And Blinken had mentioned transnational repression. Now, these are highly inflammatory terms, I think. And the reason that these terms are being used is because the West has, for decades, used Khalistanis as assets against India, to be able to activate them whenever they wish to curtail India's geopolitical maneuvering on the global stage, because by setting fire to India internally, they can control certain geopolitical outcomes. Now, this is not something I think strategic partners should be doing to each other. And it's, I think, the basis of any sort of relationship to accept and respect the territorial integrity and sovereignty of your partner. And I think this is exactly what was mentioned in different ways, both in the discussion between.
Meanwhile, calls are growing for action against Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. Canada's Hindu Forum has written to the Trudeau government seeking an entry ban on Pannu. But the question is, will Ottawa crack down on terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar's lawyer?
A designated terrorist, a notorious hate monger, the 56-year-old self-anointed Khalistani advocate holds a dual citizenship of Canada and the United States. The architect of a sham project called the Punjab referendum. 56-year-old Gurpatwant Singh Pannun issues communal threats brazenly from the US and Canada. Pressure now mounts on the Canadian government to act against Pannun. Canada's Hindu Forum has now sent a formal request to the Canadian government to impose an entry ban on Pannun on the Canadian soil.
This letter clearly says that the online hate video which is going on viral on social media platforms, it is condemned by the leader of the opposition in Canada, even by NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. So now we are looking for a stronger action from the Canadian government, and if required, then he should not be allowed in Canada.
Calls to stem the communal hatred generated by Pannun and the likes of him now resonate within Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party.
The Khalistan movement leader is trying to provoke Hindu Canadians to react and divide the Hindu and Sikh communities in Canada. Let me be clear, vast majority of our Canadian Sikh brothers and sisters do not support Khalistan movement. Most Sikh Canadians may not publicly condemn the Khalistan movement for several reasons, but they are deeply connected to the Hindu Canadian community.
The outrageous outburst of Pannun with no base whatsoever in the Sikh heartland of Punjab have come in for severe condemnation from the top Sikh religious administration in Amritsar as well.
If you talk about Pannun as being one big terrorist, well, let me tell you that he has no base in Punjab. So if the government of India is giving him importance and they are building him up, it is for the government of India to see, is he really that important that you build up a person like him who has no ground base in Punjab?
How is the government building him up, ma'am?
If you give him importance, if you give him coverage.
High time Canadian and American authorities acted tough against the ISI-backed operative seeking to drive a wedge between communities on their soil. Bureau Report, India Today.
After a series of embarrassments, the Canadian Prime Minister seems to have gone silent. He's not just overseeing what has to be one of the worst diplomatic standoffs with India over the Khalistani issue, he's also under attack from his own coalition partner over Canada's housing crisis. What's more, his aide and the House Speaker has now had to quit for honouring a Nazi veteran.
The last few days have been embarrassing for the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. First, he dropped the diplomatic equivalent of a nuclear bomb on Indo-Canada relations.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Since then, his popularity ratings have been sliding. Now he finds himself in the eye of a storm for applauding a Nazi World War II veteran. After global outrage, the Canadian Prime Minister has pinned the blame on Russian propaganda.
It's extremely upsetting that this happened. The speaker has acknowledged his mistake and has apologized. But this is something that is deeply embarrassing to the Parliament of Canada. It's going to be really important that all of us push back against Russian propaganda, Russian disinformation.
Amidst growing pressure to resign, Speaker of the Canadian House of Commons, Anthony Rota, stepped down from his post on Tuesday.
It's with a heavy heart that I rise to inform members of my resignation as Speaker of the House of Commons. This House is above any of us. Therefore, I must step down as your Speaker. I reiterate my profound regret for my error in recognizing an individual in the House during the joint address to Parliament of President Zelensky.
Meanwhile, opposition is gunning for Trudeau government. Pierre Poilievre, leader of the official opposition of Canada, said that Canadians are tired of a Prime Minister who never takes responsibility.
It is the Prime Minister whose government is responsible for both security and diplomatic vetting of everyone that comes in close proximity of a foreign leader on Canadian soil, particularly a foreign leader who is at war. The government has now admitted that they vetted everyone who was in attendance that day. Will the Prime Minister apologize for having vetted this individual and letting him come anyway?
Politically ridiculed, diplomatically criticized, and isolated even by his closest friends. In July, a separate survey also found that Trudeau was the worst Prime Minister in over 50 years. The Canadian Prime Minister is clearly pushed to the wall. Bureau Report, India Today.